Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and I'd like to take a minute to clear the air about something. A lot of folks seem to think I'm taking a big stand against violence in movies with both of my recent videos on the Kick-Ass movies. So as not to confuse anyone, I just wanted to make a quick video about this. Everybody has their own limits on how much vulgarity or brutality they can take in a story. That's simply a taste thing, out of any story context. It's no secret that I'm not a big fan of excessive swearing, though I'll admit I'm becoming more and more used to it, more and more okay with it, and I'm just not a fan of blood and gore, but I also don't want to seem prudish about this, because it would be really hypocritical of me. I like a lot of violent movies. I gave Sin City a 4 and Watchmen a 3.5 on Superhero Rewind. I like Blade, I like Constantine, I like The Crow. Sometimes I can simply get past violence that's really graphic because the story is just that good, or more often, it's because the story really requires it, like I think Watchmen did. The reason I said I felt guilty for enjoying the violence in the Kick-Ass films is because I find the purpose of those movies a little confusing. Especially with the first one, it's working on the level of traditional narrative so well that I have a really hard time seeing it as the over-the-top satire it wants to be. But then in many scenes, it's pulling that off great too. Those two things are at odds with each other. It's an issue of tone. If a movie suspends my disbelief to the point where the rules are just different, where people can have their heads split open and it's funny because it doesn't even remotely feel like the real world, then I'm fine with it. I had that with The Spirit. But in a movie about a boy realizing how dangerous the world really is, should I also be laughing at a little girl ripping people apart? And as I said in the review, I wouldn't have felt so detached about it if Dave had acknowledged how violent she was being. I guess it's the distinction between glorifying real-world violence, having violence in a film because it's necessary, and having brutal but almost cartoon violence in a film because it's totally unreal and silly. One of my favorite games when I was a kid was House of the Dead 2. Plenty of blood and guts, but it was fun and escapist. For me, it's all about intent and how the violence works in a story. That's what I was questioning with Kick-Ass. When I said I question people who go to the movies to see somebody getting hacked up, I probably should have elaborated or left that part out entirely, because without going into detail, that's a little hypocritical of me too. I went to Freddy vs. Jason years ago, and I thought it was hilarious. Again, I didn't feel like it was a glorification of real-life violence. It was purely escapist entertainment for me, and yes, I call that a guilty pleasure. What I was talking about were movies with a good story, but people who only see the violence or are only interested in the violence. I can always look past it if the story's good. I gave Kick-Ass a 3 out of 4, and dropping it a full point wasn't because it was too violent. I think it goes farther than it has to, but that's just my taste, not a narrative issue. The dropped point was mostly because Dave ignores all the carnage around him, and because I think the ending is a little cynical. If there had been a discussion about Dave's methods of crime fighting versus hit girls, it would have covered a lot of things I had reservations about. Guys, I really didn't mean to make a moral statement about violence in films. I wish there were more films with less violence, so younger kids with concerned parents could see more current movies, but that's because I'm a parent. You know, that changes your perceptions on those sorts of things. I do enjoy stylized violence, and violence for a purpose. Someone in the comments mentioned violent sports. I've got no problem with martial arts or wrestling. I took some karate, much less football or basketball. I'm not a crusader against violence in movies or television. I certainly wouldn't be interested in a lot of the things I am if I was. It's a lot more dangerous to not show the consequences and implications of real-world violence. We can't ignore that. We have to put that in narratives. But in an attempted real-world context, as Kick-Ass sort of kind of is, all I question about is whether it's too celebrated. Jim Carrey was worried about that too. That's why he's not endorsing Kick-Ass 2. I personally don't go that far. I liked Kick-Ass 2 more than a lot of people did, and that's the most vulgar, brutal thing I've seen in a while. Also, I'm doing Spawn Year, which was considered one of the most violent comics in the 90s, and I've only complained about the violence in that book when it gets in the way of the storytelling, or when it is the story. There's one issue of Curse of the Spawn that was really sadistic, and wanted the reader to think it was revealing a real-world truth or something, but it was really just trying to see how repelled it could make me. Anyway, I just wanted everybody to know that I haven't thrown away all my rated R movies or quit playing video games where you shoot people or that have blood in them. For those of you that don't know, I collect swords and knives and stuff. I do enjoy lots of things with punching and kicking and shooting in them, and I really apologize if I sent the wrong message in those reviews.